Welcome to MINYIP. We are talking AFL Supercoach and AFL Fantasy today. Let's get into the show. Hello, my name is Blake. I'm coach of Youngies Yaks and I'm joined by Clinton. How are you, Clinton?
I'm good, Blake. I'm the coach of, what am I called? Dash's Dogs. Dash's Dogs, that's my name. What are we talking about tonight, Blake? We're talking about midfielders. We're getting closer, aren't we? Getting closer.
Yeah, we've already had a week of practice scratch matches, whatever you'd like to call them. Bit different format this year. But, we're talking midfielders in this show, Clinton. After last week's Defenders show, might spring a few questions on you regarding some of the defenders from last week in terms of changes as to the practice matches, but we'll work on that when we get to it, Clinton.
Let's do that. Let's talk about MINYIP fantasy sports community. What are we up to, Blake?
There's a lot going on. We've had a few new Patreons since last week when we ran our Defender show, Clinton, which is good. So we'll put the link up on your show notes and also on the YouTube. So wherever you're watching us today, we're also on podcasts, Apple and Spotify podcasts and YouTube. So we'll put the link to our Patreon subscribers on the show notes and on the YouTube. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, Patreon's a page where you can subscribe to our channel and support the show. We mentioned it last week, 10% of the proceedings from the show are going towards Down Syndrome Victoria for our AFL season. And we'll also be doing some weekly donations. So we encourage our patrons and our community to get involved there. Down Syndrome Victoria is obviously been a big part of our lives, and they do great work with people with Down syndrome and the families and supporting them as well. So we're going to be putting some donations towards that this season for AFL. And also as a part of that, so for as little as $3 per month, you can go in our prize league to win up to $250 per format. So $500 in total there, Clinton.
Yes. So this is a new era for us, new dawn, and so we just thought to get up and going, and we'll wait and see how many people we have, and obviously go in with a chance to win the money. So we're hoping to get as many people as possible, and really trying to grow this community to obviously just like us who enjoy their fantasy sport, and we can get on Discord and talk Supercoach and AFL fantasy scores, and I'm looking forward to this season, Blake. It's obviously with the last 2 years, hopefully we have an uninterrupted season, and in terms of the fantasy games, we're hoping that it can all go smooth sailing, and we're looking forward to creating some content and making it fun for everyone.
Absolutely. We want to help our community as much as possible with their teams where we can. So I'm already getting flooded with messages pretty much on a daily basis already of people changing their teams each day. So it's going to be pretty busy, but definitely looking forward to this season and what we're doing with MINYIP, with our community, with the Patreons there. I've going to be doing a newsletter for the higher subscribers and weekly team reviews with people. So it's definitely very exciting. We've had a message during the week, Clinton, of some people from our community just looking for a bit of support. So we had a question come through. I'll shoot it to you first and see how you can best answer it for your perspective. So from Mitchell on the Twitter, he sent this through. Also, there's a cat about to appear on screen, so don't mind that. So the question from Mitchell there, Clinton, was what gets the most points in Supercoach versus Fantasy? Because he always gets caught out selecting players who he thinks will score well, but they don't. So what kind of players get the most points in different formats? Just very quickly, if you can.
Sure. Well, first of all, we're covering both formats tonight. Obviously, in the season, we'll have separate shows. But ultimately, for me, Supercoach, there's different ways to score more points with contested possessions, intercept marks, how you use the ball. If you're choosing a player who may not be a great kick or turns the ball over a bit, it's maybe someone to avoid. So in terms of if you're tossing up players, I'd like to target players who like those contested possessions and contested marks and etc. So ruckman, for example, get easy points for being contested situations. Whereas AFL Fantasy, obviously, it's just a more structured way of scoring where you target players who like to get a lot of the ball, like to get marks, and also like to get tackles. So it's as simple as that, really. In that format, you generally try to avoid key forwards for that reason.
Yeah, there's a bit of controversy in the fantasy sports community regarding the scoring of Supercoach and how it's formatted. But it's definitely different models in terms of how they do their scoring with rounding up and stuff like that. For the defenders, I like to sort of group players into different categories and how they'll score. So for defenders, I call them the quarterbacks, Clinton. Players that teams like to get the ball in their hands. I'm sure it's been used in a few different fantasy shows and in the community widely. So I like the quarterbacks in the back line, the intercept markers, and the defenders that play midfield minutes as well. So pretty much across both formats, those are your players that will score well as defenders. You don't really want to get those lockdown kind of roles. So for example, one of the players that I saw from last week, Clinton, Aiden Core, he wasn't either of those scoring potential defending roles that I liked. He wasn't a quarterback, wasn't an intercept marking player, and he wasn't playing midfield minutes. So there's one change already that I didn't like his role from the practice match. And the role they're playing within their team is pretty important in terms of their scoring. For fantasy, I'd just like to go for players that get a lot of the ball and use the ball well. Is pretty much how I like to go about it. It seems like
fantasy.
Yeah, in fantasy.
It doesn't really matter if they use the ball well or not. Fantasy.
If they're using the ball well, their teams like to get the ball into their hands. It seems like in fantasy, intercept markers don't score quite as well, but that's just
a mark's a mark. It's
yeah.
That's where Supercoach, it's different. So a mark is a mark. Doesn't matter if you have 10 contested intercepts, it's still counted as the same points.
Exactly. So that's why I think they score less, because in Supercoach they get scaled up for contested marks.
Well done, Blake. You've answered that question very well just then.
Yeah, so that's my opinion of how they score. So that just proves as a reminder to our community to follow us on the socials and send through questions, and we'll try to answer them the best we can. So if you look at MINYIP, we're on Twitter, Instagram. I haven't posted a TikTok for a little while now, Clinton, but I'll make sure
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'll make sure to post one of them for you. I know how much you enjoy.
I've been waiting. I've been on TikTok every day, waiting for that post, and it hasn't come through. So,
well, you're not the only one. So
I'll be hanging by the phone tomorrow. Yeah.
I do have a job. I can't be posting on socials all the time, but surprising, I know I do have a job outside of MINYIP. Well, just quickly, Clinton, I just want to check with you some defenders who might have caught your eye or who have come into your team or dropped out of your team from practice match information.
Oh, yeah, good question. The big couple, I think, from our discussion last week, reality is, in terms of everyone picking their teams right now, there's going to be so many changes still before round one. So people are stressing out it seems like every day, changing their team and saying, oh, is this a good team? And then the next day there'll be an injury or something. So have fun playing around with your teams, but by no means think it's the end product, because in the space of the next 2 weeks, there's going to be lots of changes still. So, for example, Aaron Hall is injured, and there's other players like Chesser was going to be potentially on-field rookie for us, who's now injured. The recent news of the last couple of hours of today is that Charlie Dean's gone to get scans or something.
Ooh,
so
bit of breaking news there from Clinton.
Well, I'm hot off the press there. So I don't think we'll see how he progresses. So it's going to be constant things like that. But ultimately, yeah, it's the practice games, which we just saw, are a rough gauge. I think things will ramp up over this weekend's games. But ultimately, some players don't try their hardest in the preseason. They get ready for round one. So you can't take a lot out of it, but it's a bit of information to help guide you. So, for example, yeah, I haven't changed my team in a week. I'm not tweaking it every day. So the likes of Jaden Short might have scored well. Chris looked well in terms of his midfield. But yeah, we'll just wait and see. I'm not looking forward to gathering more information this weekend. Then I might tweak a bit next week.
Probably a big move from my defenders so far. Hewitt's come into my team. Out of that practice match, he pretty much played 100% of minutes in the midfield. And like I said, I like that defender midfield minutes. Looks like he's got a good role there at Carlton with Walsh being injured and protecting Cripps a bit there. So he's pretty much my main one that's come into my team. Other than that, I haven't really changed too much either. Judging from what I've seen so far, I think we're going to be light on for defender rookies, which might be interesting for our structure going forward. But we'll see what the next batch of practice matches comes through. But at this stage, it looks like we might be a bit light on there, and that'll be interesting in terms of how people structure their team.
Spot on. So I think this can flow into the midfield chat, which we're about to start talking about, I assume. But
yeah, you can go into that, yeah.
A lot will depend on, as you just mentioned, the rookies that we can get. So things are changing every day with all that. So it's not worth losing sleep over changing your team every day. But, for example, what I'm seeing is a lot of the best rookie options, I think, are midfielders. So the idea that I'm potentially looking at in terms of structure is that there's lots of gun players that we want in terms of premiums throughout the midfield, and a lot of people I'm seeing having 3, 4, or 5 of them. But something I'm considering, and I haven't done it myself yet, but I'm looking at potentially playing more of those better rookies throughout the midfield and maybe having just the 2 premiums and then making my team stronger in other lines. So that's something I'm going to play around with when it comes to doing that properly and after seeing more information. But we'll get through some names now, and I'm just seeing a lot of players I like as those rookie prices, and I think they're going to be the best rookie scorers, and you'd rather them being on field. So how that looks with the rest of your team, it's going to be very interesting. So let's get into it.
Well, since we're on the matter of it, Clinton, I reckon let's flip it around and let's talk about some of those rookie midfielders that you like the look of. Obviously,
Sure.
Horn, Francis, and Dacos are the big ones. They're a bit pricier than your usual bench options for rookies, but I think they perform quite well over the practice matches, and they look like ready bodies for the AFL season come round one, and they're worth the spend and to have them on field.
Well, you want job security, especially at the start of the season. There's a lot of names being thrown out there, but it's very questionable if some of these players will be even playing round one. And then if they do, you want them to be playing for at least the first month. So that's why those 2 players should be in everyone's teams. Despite, especially Dacos is probably number 1. Horn Francis is someone who might be a bit more debatable, but I think he's going to be very highly owned, and I think he's got every chance of being a good scorer. He's going to be floating around different positions, getting his chances to do his thing, and I think he'll score well early. So I think everyone should be starting him as well.
Yeah, I think they'll be pretty much in the majority of teams. They'll probably be the most owned players going to round one, I'd say, just about, depending on team selection and how they go in the next few practice matches. But I'm pretty confident in that as well.
The next one I'd say on top of that, so we'll obviously go through some names.
Yeah.
But Dylan Stevens from Sydney's been pumped up massively by Horse, and it seems as though he's you never know how concrete he is in round one team, but looks like he's tracking really well. And obviously, we'll get more information over the next week or so. But if he's in there at round one, I think everyone should be picking him also, because he's at a price that can gain you a lot of money and should be scoring pretty well. So he's someone I'll be locking in as well.
At what sort of price would you consider them to stop being rookies by Lake Clinton? Like Horn Francis is probably right on the limit, you'd say, probably?
Well, yeah, he's the most premium rookie. So that's anyone can define what they want in terms of rookie price. Obviously, it depends what format you're talking about, but I think he's the top for rookies, and anything above that would maybe be considered borderline rookie, borderline mid-price.
Yeah. Some other popular players. I'll just go through some names quickly for Hawthorn Clinton, as you can't discuss them. Some players who are in a lot of teams and they played all right over the last week. I believe you got McDonald there, Finn McGuinness, and Josh Ward will be some popular players. Another one who's not a first-year player is Newcomb's at 261 and Supercoach still, and he played a lot of midfield minutes there in the opening practice match. So he'll be another one to consider. I thought I'd just throw up some Hawthorn names for you there, Clinton, because obviously with your connection there, you can't talk about them.
Yep, well done. The other club, which I think is largely relevant, is Gold Coast. We'll get to Matt Rowell soon, but for me, the name that popped up, I think a bit out of nowhere, was Alex Davies, who no one was really talking about in the last few weeks, but the way he performed, he's also at a pretty hefty starting price, but he's someone who looks like he could score very well early. So he's someone that, if he's looking good for round one.
Absolutely, similar price to Horn Francis and Dacos in the different formats. A game that I followed quite closely and I counted the centre bounce attendances for and got a good response on Twitter was the Adelaide game. There was a couple of players that performed quite well. Pedler, he was in at a few set of bounces there, Clinton. He's a forward mid and at that cheaper price. I think he looked quite similar to Sam Berry out there. I got a bit confused at stages, but he did attend some centre bounces, and I think he's definitely put his name up for round one. So that's one option there. And also, I believe it's pronounced Rochelle. He kicked 3 goals in the second half, I'm pretty sure. He reminded me of Rankin from Gold Coast. He very exciting player, moves around the ground well. So I think he'll be in a lot of teams round one.
Just with those types of players, Blake, I think we should leave them for the forwards, because we could mention 20 different forwards who are like, for example, Dunkley, Dusty, and Canelio, and Rochelle. So I think we'll leave them for the forwards, but definitely, he's definitely worth mentioning. That's for sure.
Yeah, at this stage, I've got the structure to have one forward mid in my midfield. I do like having the option there to rotate them for Supercoach and Fantasy, so I can have the flexibility. But with the new rule changes of potentially adding positions midway through the season and stuff like that for Supercoach, it might not be as relevant anymore, needing that player switch, dual position players, I should say.
I think it's always relevant, because you get to that stage of the year, and to be able to flick around potentially rookies, those bench options always comes in handy. If you're trying to loophole, etc. And I think it is handy to have. So I think that's a new dynamic, definitely for Supercoach, but has been part of AFL Fantasy for a few years now. Yeah,
and any other rookies there, Clinton, for the midfield?
Just someone. Now, I didn't deep dive into his stats, but just someone I just put his name down. Just as I was creating a list for this recording,
This will be interesting.
yeah, it will be, because we're not even up to the real mid prices yet. Jared Pollock for Kangaroos. If you check out his Supercoach price, he's someone who you never know. You never know if he's someone who can find his best form, can find a role in the Kangaroos team, senior team. You never know, he could be someone. Now, when I mention this name, it's probably laughable, isn't it? But
if you looked at last year's stats, yes.
No, correct. But the name I'll mention is Taylor Walker. At the start of last season, you would have been ridiculed if you suggested you're going to start the season with Taylor Walker, and then 2 rounds in, everyone was trading him in because he literally scored 140. Now, not saying but you never know. He's just someone that I've got his name down as someone, if he randomly pulls out an amazing performance this week and then looks like he's playing round 1, you just never know. But he's not
for a player like that. What do you want him to be averaging on a weekly basis for it to be beneficial? Do you reckon?
It's not a season keeper. It's someone who can start the season and score reasonably well and make me some money, which is the idea of a rookie. So,
just give you some background there. So it's priced at $246 in Supercoach. Played 5 games last year at an average of 50. He had 2 scores under 30, 2 scores in the 60s, and his highest score for the year was an 80. And before that, he was a consistent sort of 80 to 90 average for about 4 seasons. So if you want him to score that, he'll be a very inconsistent player. But if he's getting a lot of... Before that, he was playing just about every game for the year. Like, he played 3 full seasons in a row without a hitch. So now it's definitely an interesting option there, Clinton.
It's just the name I'm not starting, but it's just, if he comes out this week and all of a sudden he's getting lots of the ball, he's just someone to put in the back pocket as a possibility. That's all I'm saying.
A player that's around that similar price is Jared Berry for the Lions. So I think a lot of players will be going for Berry over Pollock, Clinton. He kicked, I think, 3 or 4 goals in the pracky last week, but he's going to be playing more midfield this season, I believe. He'll be definitely a strong option. Again, he didn't perform too well last year. I believe he had a few injuries and stuff like that. But yeah, he'll be definitely a good rookie selection at only $268K in Supercoach. If you still consider that to be a rookie.
I'm not sure about AFL Fantasy, but yeah, definitely Supercoach. The other couple of names in this mid-price range, going a little bit higher up now. Matty Rao, Patrick Lipinski is the 2 names I wanted to mention. And they're both guys who I was very tempted by about a month ago. At the moment, they're not in my team, which I had, as I said, last week. But Rao, I want to see him, especially this week, how he goes. Now, I didn't see the game on the weekend just gone, but I heard something about him being a bit more of a negative role. I'm not sure if he was tagging, but maybe a bit more defensive inside. So, I'm not. As soon as I heard that, he's not going to be in my team. But if he gets back to just can assist Tuke with running around and get more of the ball and contested possessions, he's someone that I may potentially bring in after the first couple of rounds if that's the case. But I don't think I'll start him. Lipinski, it looks like he's got the midfield role at the Pies, and at the moment he's still not in my team. But if he impresses again this weekend, there's a chance I might try and slot him in, which sort of just emphasises my point around trying to bring in these types of names and then maybe taking a bit of a haircut with the premiums in the midfield and spreading the money elsewhere.
Yeah, I think Tuke at Gold Coast will be the main option there. He looked I think he'll continue on his form from last season, and that might be interesting in terms of what role Rowell does play in that midfield. Another one for Gold Coast there, Clinton, who is slightly more expensive, who looks like he's had a big preseason, is Noah Anderson. He played just about attended every centre bounce in that first practice match. So it'll be interesting to see how they structure up for this upcoming practice match, because I think they'll pretty much how they line up for this practice match is how they'll go into round one. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this one. So some other mid prices, you pretty much covered them there. Lipinski's in both my teams for Supercoach and Fantasy at the moment. So don't need to cover him again. I'll just have a quick look at some other names, Clinton. Schoenberg for Adelaide. He's another mid-price option. He's sort of that inside mid, but whether he'll get minutes with Dawson coming across and Sloan, Barry, those kinds of players taking away from his opportunity, I'm not too sure, but I liked him last season. I selected him last season. I might have gone one season too early, which happens to me quite a bit, unfortunately. Yeah, so he's another mid-price option.
At his price, though, Blake, what would he have to score for you to really benefit? So, I mean, is he really going to score you that much to improve his, to make the money for you? Well, that's the reason why you're selecting him. So that's the question.
Exactly. So he'd have to go from averaging 71 to be averaging probably about 90, at least at that price of about 390 in Supercoach. You want him to be averaging probably 90 plus, and that would only make 100, 150K in Supercoach. So whether it's worth that risk, it's probably not for a start. But if he starts the season on fire, it's another name considering.
I've got a similar name. Sorry, Blake, to interrupt you there, but Sarong at Fremantle. So he's a little bit more pricey. I'm not sure if you were about to mention him, but I think
you're right.
He's, in terms of the top tier, I've got about 12 names written down, but in terms of the top tier, Sarong would have to get to that for him to be worth it, which is the question which I've sort of been thinking about him, because I think he's potentially going to have the role at Fremantle, but he's going to really have to score well to be worthwhile selecting him. So let's just strip it back. Well, that's for Supercoach. I think AFL Fantasy, Sarong, with the trades that you have with AFL Fantasy, he's the type of player I think you should be picking, because the growth is there. You're going to make money, and then you can upgrade later with the amount of trades you have with AFL Fantasy. That's where Supercoach is a bit different. So, yeah, he's one of those tricky players that he's going to be in that bracket of I want him, but I'm not sure if I'll squeeze him in.
It's funny, so the players you've sort of said you'll the mid prices you don't know whether you'll take a risk on. They're all in my fantasy team, because my approach over the last couple of fantasy seasons has been to select these sort of mid prices who have had a change in role, or they're potentially getting more midfield minutes, is selecting them, and it paid off for me early days last season. So Lipinski, Sarong, Rao, they're all in my team at the moment, fantasy, because you get that 2 trades each week. Is it still 2 or is it 3 now with fantasy?
2.
Yeah, still 2. But yeah, you get those trades each week, so you may as well be using them. And so I'm happy to take a few extra risks in fantasy. So those kind of players are in my starting team. Probably the next tier up from that, Clinton, for in Supercoach wise, I've got Patrick Cripps. Obviously averaged very well in previous seasons. No Walsh there. I thought Walsh took away, even though Cripps looked injured and battered for most of last season, I thought they were hitting to Walsh most of the time at centre bounces. He's averaged, in 2018, he was averaging 119, 2019, 117. So he's got that history there. And as long as the risk is that he stays fit once he gets into a few rounds, and if he's getting bashed in there, but Hewitt and Chera might help that out. But yeah, he's in my Supercoach team.
He's a no from me. He's in that range that would need to reach that premium to be worthwhile, and I can't see it happening with him, especially consistently. He might pull out a one big game, but I have question marks how consistent he'll be, and that's why I'd rather pay a little bit more. And the only real other name slightly more expensive is Lachie Neale, who I think should be in everyone's team. That's personally. But yeah, besides that, there's a fair gap between Lachie Neale and then going down to mid-pricer, because that's, I'm not sure. The thing about mid-pricers are generally they are a trap, and they're a trap for that reason. They need to elevate their game to that elite level, and I don't think that will be happening with Cripps. But he may prove me wrong. If he does, if he's dominating after the first so many weeks, I'll happily pay a bit more and be proven wrong that way. But I think it's more likely you'll be burnt by starting him.
Might be at the peak of his career this season. It's not that old, and previously averaged 117 plus for 2 years in a row.
Okay,
he's got the history there.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I think you should consider him more closely.
I'll watch a fair bit of footy, and I'm not saying he's a bad player. I just, in terms of scoring, he's a no for me.
Yeah. In terms of my midfield structure, I can afford at this stage 3 sort of 500k plus players, 2 to 3 midfielders, and then surrounding them by rookies. So at this stage, I've got Lachie Neale. He, as you just mentioned, he should return to his form and how he ended last season. He performed quite well after returning from an injury. So he's definitely a fallen price, and I think he'll return to his good form. He had the good, strong centre bounce attendances in that practice match. And currently my 2 ultra premium players who I want to be averaging 120 points plus in Supercoach, so they're captain options. I've got Clayton Oliver, who obviously a lot of people will be selecting. I can't see his role changing. I can't see any reason not to select him. And the other player who you won't be able to talk about is Tom Mitchell-Clinton. Is obviously an inside mid that'll be playing a lot of minutes in the midfield and just collecting the ball as he usually does.
Yeah, I mean, you can throw a blanket over seriously six of the premiums, and it's up to your own opinion which ones you go for. And ultimately, it's all about juggling the money and trying to optimize your points, and then obviously how much cash you're making throughout the year. So of all those players, it's hard to make an argument why you shouldn't. Like, you should or you shouldn't. Like, I mean, obviously the likes of McRae, Steele, and Tuke Miller, who we've already mentioned Tuke, but like they're the 3 that stand out as just the guns of the game, and you want them, just who you start. And that's where I think the fixtures really come in early in the season. That's why Jack Steele and Jack McRae, for that matter, are really appealing with their start of the season. But then in saying that, Melbourne are reigning premiers. We'll get to Ruxon in a different recording, but
yeah,
Maxi Gawn is dominating the ruck. And you've got Clayton Oliver, as you mentioned, and Petrarca, who I think is elevating his game almost every single time he runs out there. So Petrarca is the one for me that at his price I'm really keen on. The other part to that is a lot of people asked me throughout grand final week who I thought was going to win the Norm Smith, and I was quite happy to mention that name. And I think just being smug with the fact that I picked the Norm Smith medalist, I'm willing to maybe start him in my teams this year, because I just think he's just absolutely almost unstoppable right now. And those Melbourne guys, they come across as real determined guys to do it all over again. So I'm half tempted to start Max, Oliver, and Petrarca. Like, I just think they're going to absolutely dominate again. So yeah, it's all about the balance with the premiums. It's hard to pick faults with them. McRae, just talking about McRae quickly, like he got announced as vice captain, I think, a few weeks ago. It was vice captain, wasn't it?
I'm not too sure. Yeah.
So that was a few weeks ago, and it just he sort of mentioned how proud he was of it and how he'd been struggling with things off the field, and he's looking for. I just coming across as surprising considering how well he's played recently. That he's had some stuff going on. So if he's in a good frame of mind, like I imagine him, there's a window of him being even better, which is pretty scary if you don't own him. So let's pinpoint. Obviously, we could talk broadly, like I have spent the last 5 minutes, but another name I just want to mention, Ollie Wines, is someone who in the AFL fantasy season last year I got on really early, and I was quite chuffed about because he just dominated. I think he's a really good AFL fantasy player. With Supercoach, he's known to turn the ball over a little bit more, which impacts his scoring. But he's someone like, if you look at the percentage of teams that they're in, I think it's amazing how people just flock to certain players and other players who are, I think, very similar. So I think that's how people are going to win these the titles this year, and that's selecting these players who maybe are on par but that aren't as trendy as the others. So here's one I just wanted to throw up because I think he's a gun player. He gets a lot of contested possessions. He's great for that reason for Supercoach, but he might turn the ball over a little bit. But I think he's just someone who will score really well all year. Hard, not many teams tag, but even if they do tag, I think he still finds an avenue to score. So just wanted to mention him. I'll let you have the chance to speak.
Thanks, mate. I'm on this show as well, yeah. Wines was the 6th highest averaging player in fantasy last season, and he's only in 4% of teams currently.
At the moment or last year? Oh, okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah. At the moment, he's only in 4% of teams, and he was the 6th highest averaging player last season. So another one for fantasy there, Clinton, is Jared Lyons. He was the 3rd highest averaging player in fantasy, and he's currently in 2% of teams going into the season.
I think that has a fair bit to do with the red flag that Chris Fagan put out there that potentially.
I didn't believe that for a second.
Well, time will tell, and I think with the likes of Berry and
Rayner.
Name escapes. No, not Rayner. Other one as well. Bailey,
Cockatoo.
Zach Bailey.
Oh, Zach Bailey.
No, Zach Bailey.
Cockatoo played some midfield minutes as well.
I think they will be spending some more time in there. I think Lions will be the one that's moved elsewhere. So I think that's justified him, but maybe Wines is on a different page.
As we speak, Clinton, some names are coming to me that are starting to appeal to me as unique options who will still score very well, like Zach Merritt and Darcy Parish. They performed very well last season. Their roles won't change. They're quite durable players. They barely missed a game over the last couple of years. So they might be a few differential picks. Another one in fantasy that I've got, Clinton, is the lifesaver down at the retirement home down in Geelong, is Patrick Dangerfield.
Interesting, yeah.
He's currently like I said, I like to take a few riskier picks in fantasy, and he's currently in my team there. I don't see anyone taking his role. He's obviously still going to be a damaging midfielder and dangerous forward. So I can't see why. He's not a good selection. You might be able to talk me out of it. Maybe he's aging a bit, but I think he's still a good option for fantasy. Only 728k.
I won't try and talk you out of it. I think for me, there's another part to it of when you're weighing up selection. Sometimes if you want to enjoy it yourself, you select someone that you enjoy watching. And if you're tossing up a couple of players and there might be something weird, like some weird little thing that you may dislike a player about, like, or you just enjoy watching someone because they're a better kick or whatever it may be, just go with what you think because, yeah, that's what.
Are you suggesting people don't like Dangerfield?
No, I wasn't meaning him at all. I was just saying in general, when you're weighing up a couple of players, if it's a 50-50, sometimes make it enjoyable for yourself by choosing the player that you like the most. And a player that I think is only improving, and now it's maybe arguably their best player is Brayshaw at Fremantle. I think he's just a gun player. I've liked watching him the last couple of years. He's been in my teams, and now that he's pretty much classified as a premium, now I'm just, as I discussed earlier, now it's hard to really select him because now I'm pitting him up against these other guys, and I sort of just gravitate towards those sexier names because they're just, yeah. So he's a name.
Sexy names.
Well, just trendy names. Well, it feels like everyone says they're in their team, whereas for no reason there's other players who are pretty much the same that aren't. So, I mean, in terms of sex, I mean, people talking about them just as in it's all just the rage and jumping on bandwagon. So,
I remember at the end of last season there was a game there, and afterwards about Andrew Brayshaw, you said he'll be my first selected next year in Supercoach. I specifically remember it was because he scored 190 Supercoach points. I remember you saying he'll be my first selected player next year.
Oh dear.
And you've converted to the sexy players.
Yeah, maybe. But what I will say is, over the course of the next 2 weeks, we've still got 2 weeks, don't we? 2 weeks, there'll be
2 weeks.
A lot of the structures that we have in our teams will be determined by the rookies, and then it's all about, that's when the judgment day will come with those selections. And as I said, there's a fair blanket. There's a name we haven't even mentioned, is Bontempelli, who I think
he's been in and out of my teams, yeah.
An amazing player who sneezes and he gets 10 Supercoach points. So, yeah, I mean, we'll just wait and see on what unfolds, Blake, but there's a lot of justifiable names there. People should go with who they like. And there's one more name who's on my list that I haven't mentioned, is Josh Kelly. He played vast majority of games last year, which is a great sign. Depends what his role is, but I think he's, in terms of players that I personally like watching, I mean, he's just a gun. Really like watching him play. He's got all the tricks. And if there's one player I want to, in terms of enjoying watching games, it'd be him. Pretty much over everyone in the league. Just the question is, he has the history of injuries and history of maybe being mixed around with his roles, but he's just someone that I love watching.
Yeah, with Caniglio potentially playing more midfield minutes, Taranto's probably just about at his peak now, but he looks like he's going to play more forward. Yeah, his role is a bit in question. They might move him out to the wing a bit more. Still got Tom Green and those likes out there. Pretty much two teams that we haven't mentioned any players from Clinton. West Coast, I don't think just about anyone will be relevant for West Coast after seeing their practice.
Will be. It just won't be who you expect. It'll be middle of the season. It'll be a rookie, or it might be returning from injury.
Andrew Gaff.
No, maybe a Tim Kelly might return to his best form. But yeah, there's a few teams that right now their seasons are already looking a little bit bleak, but things can turn around pretty quick in footy. Yeah,
the Andrew Gaff is definitely one that's on my never again list for any fantasy format after some.
Harsh.
Anytime I get him in, he just lets me down. He's pretty much the main player that does that to me. Fife, he could have a good season, but again, that would be interesting, the dynamic between Brayshaw and Sarong there. But he's obviously a premium player. He's around the price of Neil as well. So he's another one to keep an eye on. Another team that we haven't talked about is Richmond. They don't really have too many players that are only midfield. There's a few options that are mid forwards. So we'll talk about in the forward show, and that just about covers each team. I think there, Clinton. Sydney have obviously got Heaney going to go through the midfield, but he's a forward. And that, we've just about covered everyone else.
That's good that we catered for every team.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I'm glad you mentioned that, because the likes of the Bulldogs and Melbourne, you mentioned, I think, before about, I think, Took and how they share the load. Like, sometimes, like, there's players that still find a way to score, even if they have 2 or 3 gun midfielders, they still score well. So I wouldn't be deterred by if there's one gun player that he can't choose someone else. So, and that refers to someone like a Rao. If you think Rao is going to dominate again, like he did when he first started playing, then pick him. But don't think because there's a one gun that they can't share the points, because Melbourne are proof that they can share the points a bit.
Yeah, I think especially Bulldogs as well. They've showed that, like McRae, Bontempelli obviously peaked in their scoring last season, but they had the likes of Dunkley and Chalor, and they can still score well. Although Dunkley didn't score well last season, by the end of it, they all popped up for some big scores throughout the year. And there'll be some options that we talk about in the forward show as well.
Just one more thing, sorry, Blake, just talking about that. An example I'd like to use is Richmond from a few years ago, and that when they were winning all these flags, obviously great team, but that at that time didn't necessarily reflect in great Supercoach scores. Like Dusty, for a short period there, I won't say short, but a couple of seasons, he was obviously a great pick, but they shared the points around the team. They played great team football. There was no one really the one getting 40 touches, or there was no, at that time, there was no Jaden Shaw getting 40 touches. They shared the points amongst their team. So the question is, how hungry?
Balance.
Yeah, well, that's right. So if you look at someone like Jack Steele last year, he was the one, he was the man. Whereas Richmond, so that's just something to watch, especially at the start of the year. What are the teams doing? Are they a team that really shares the points, or is it a team where it's like, no, we've got 2 or 3 main guys that just feed them the ball? They're the players who should target.
And that's where the new coaches come into it as well. Voss for Carlton, he might just say, let's just get the ball through Cripps, or
not sure.
As an example, or McRae at Collingwood, like how he uses Pendlebury.
Not sure.
Okay. All right. I'll just keep my opinions for another show.
I'm just teasing you, Blake. You're right.
I'm pretty much repeating what you said last week at the show about the coaches having an impact on playing styles and how players score.
I was teasing the names you mentioned, that's all.
Cripps and Pendlebury, some of your favourites.
No, you said you say Finn McRae. You mean McRae for Collingwood?
I said McRae for coaching Collingwood.
Good, because I thought you were talking about the player.
I wasn't talking about Finn. I wasn't talking about Finn McRae. No.
That's what I thought you were referring to.
I was referring to the coach. No.
You got a bit salty there, but anyway.
I didn't know what I did wrong, but obviously not considering Finn McRae off the back of that. But
no, well, it's just I thought it was a weird name to bring up, so I thought I'd just poke a bit of fun at you.
No, I appreciate that. That was good. I was talking about the coach, but it's all right. Craig McRae. That pretty much wraps up our midfielders, Clinton, unless you want to talk about Finn McRae for a bit more. Like I said earlier, we'll follow us on our Patreon and on our socials so you can stay up to date with our shows. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave a review so that we get recognized on there. With YouTube, just hit the like button for us. I've found that the more people that like the show, the the higher views we get, Clinton. So if you're watching the show, please leave a like on there or leave a review on the podcast.
And subscribe.
Yep, absolutely. Subscribe. We've had a fair few new subscribers to the YouTube channel. So it's been great. We can't really track the podcast subscribers too much, but we definitely had a lot of listens last week. So wherever you're watching or listening to us today, we appreciate your support. And check out the Patreon. Like I said, the link will be provided in the show notes. So any questions, feel free to send us a message, leave a comment, or hit us up on our social media platforms.
It's an exciting time of year, Blake. We've still got 2 weeks to go. There's a lot of juggling to be had yet. So I think I can sense a bit of stress about some people and their teams and injuries. It's just all part of it. So it's all about embracing the fun of it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
trying to win the $250 in each of the formats with us.
Yeah, well, hopefully one of us win it, but we'd love to give it away to
the community. Is that right?
Yeah, we'd love to give it away to one of our community members on the Patreon. So hopefully we can help your team to win that $500 there, Clinton. So, that'll wrap up our show for this evening, and we'll catch you next show.